Hello, New Zealand. Welcome to Political Playback. And joining me, as always, because I just can't seem to get rid of him, or he can't get rid of me, is Simon O'Connor. How are you, Simon?
I'm doing very well, Bob, and yourself?
Very good. Look, it's been the usual type of week where there has been so much going on that it's been pretty difficult to actually figure out what we should cover in our 40 minutes or so, which it gets slightly longer each time because there's so much material. No shortage this week. Actually, maybe I'll just put up the topic now, the poll. Should we change the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa New Zealand? We actually have some polling results to find out what Kiwis think about that. Some very interesting poll results, but we might just do a little poll amongst ourselves. What do you think, Simon? Should we change it?
Well, first and foremost, you've just tossed a hand grenade out there with that question, haven't you? But no, I don't think we need to change it. And if we ever were to, it's got to be by referendum. But because what's happening at the moment is by stealth, if that's even the right word. It's just been foisted upon us by the, I don't know, the elites and media. I suspect you'll find the poll goes a particular way.
The media are certainly working hard on pushing just Aotearoa, and I noticed even during the Olympics when the flag was marching in with the label New Zealand, it was referred to as Aotearoa, and I thought, oh, hang on, we need to be sort of consistent here. And once again, I don't think people have had the discussion. It really has been rammed down from the elites and from the media. And I just think that type of tactic, even if it's got merit, it just doesn't help the cause when it's sort of rammed down like that and people are told what to think.
Look, you've nailed it. I mean, I'd make two quick points. One is it's about conversation. These things should be discussed. The current situation is, as you say, media in particular and others say, this is what it's going to be. And if you've got a disagreement, you're a racist, which is hardly useful. But the other is, it's the same strategy, Bob. Often it starts with New Zealand Aotearoa, then it becomes Aotearoa New Zealand, and then all of a sudden New Zealand drops off. I mean, look at University of Auckland, for example, has adopted a Māori name. They use both of them and then they drop the English. And again, it's not something that's ever discussed. It's just foisted on us, and it adds frustration and actually stops genuine progress.
Yeah. Okay, let's get straight into our topics. Well, anyway, if you do want to give us some feedback on that, you need to do it through our Facebook page, the Family First Facebook page, or through the YouTube. If you put your comments in there, then they will come right to my little computer over here that you often see me looking over to the side. And it's a simple poll we're doing tonight, and we will give you the results of what the majority of New Zealanders think. It's a pretty strong result, actually, and very interesting. But should we change the name to either Aotearoa just on its own, or Aotearoa New Zealand, or do we leave it at New Zealand? In fact, I think in the poll there was actually another category which was another name. I have no idea what they're thinking on that particular bit, but anyway, we will find out. Anyway, into our first topic, and it is 1 year, just over 1 year and 3 days since the new government came in. And look, the question is, what has the government achieved? I actually had a look, Simon, before you comment on that. I looked through the One News article just to see, okay, what has the government done? And actually, it's actually a really long list. I mean, cancelling light rail, scrapping the electoral legislation bill, allowing 16-year-olds to vote, increasing the minimum wage, reset of the welfare system with sanctions on beneficiaries if they don't toe the line, crackdown on gangs, repeal of the anti-smoking law changes, or some of them, pothole prevention fund, reintroduction of boot camps, bringing back charter schools, revised version of the three strikes law, referendum for Māori wards, first budget, literacy in schools, so a lot in education, New Zealand's firearm laws, which is causing a lot of hoo-ha, and the treaty's principal bill, and reinstating the 90-day trial. So actually, I think you're past your 90 days, Simon, with Family First, so I can't use that one anymore. And the NZTA Waka Kotahi to halt work on the many cycling and walking projects, and hopefully getting rid of a whole lot of judder bars in my local area. So what do you think, Simon? In terms of their first 12 months, they've done pretty well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've listed off probably about half of what they've actually done. I suppose the first point would be And by the way, I wouldn't be able to complete the list. I mean, there's other things like bright line tests. There's now no fault tenancies are back again. And there's other things that could be for some controversial. But regardless, you'd have to say that this government's been exceptionally busy in its first 100 days. There's been no shortage of repeals and changes. I would take partly he's a friend, but I take my hat off to Simeon Brown. So much of what has been done is actually in the transport space, whether or not it's changes around the Auckland regional fuel tax, for example, through to potholes. Enormous amount of good things. Obviously, other elements that people might disagree with, but you can't disagree with the government actually busily making the changes. I would make the point, though, media have almost glossed over a lot of those things. When you read them off, I think a lot of people go, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Media has been very quick to attack the government and very rarely praise them.
You've served, did you serve 3 or 4 terms? 3 terms.
I think got 4 terms.
4.
God, you put
That's
me on
what
the
I thought.
spot there.
Sorry. Yeah. So in terms of the first year, do you think any previous government has been quite this busy? Because from what I've observed, they really have gone for it. And there's almost been this cruel to be kind approach, which we're going to look at the latest polling shortly. But, the government has pulled some pretty tough policies and been quite radical, and it's all happened within 12 months. They have been busy compared to some governments, haven't they?
Look, they definitely have been. So kudos to them there. I mean, it's not sitting back on their laurels. Chris Luxon pretty much cracked the whip from day one and set very high expectations. The slight caveat is that a lot of what they've done is repealing. Now, that's not to take away from that changes, but it's much easier to repeal something to actually then create new laws. So repealing things like the Auckland Rail, Auckland, well, they actually got rid of
Light
Auckland
rail.
Rail. Things, light rail, they got rid of. That's why I was getting confused. Cut the funding for the ferries. Again, whether people would agree with them or not, that's relatively quick and easy. Repealing the 90 days, repealing Māori wards, that's easier than actually creating new policy. The only little red flag I might quickly raise, though, Bob, is they've used an inordinate amount of urgency. In other words, a lot of this stuff has been rammed through Parliament with very little public oversight, and that does make me uncomfortable, even if I agree with a lot of what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay, well, the big question is, has it affected their polling? Just before I have a look at that, just a reminder of the poll that we're doing for tonight's show, and that is, should we change the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa New Zealand? We've got the Research New Zealand polling, but we're interested to know what you think, those of you who are watching. So put your vote on either YouTube or on the Facebook Family First page. It has to be on the Family First page for us to get the comment. So there's a lot of F's there. So let's have a look at the latest political
you're getting
polls.
quite tongue-tied.
And so there was 2 polls that came out last week. There was a Courier Market Research poll, which if you look up the top there, blue, that's national, had a dip. So everyone got very excited. And red had a increase. So other people got very excited. And the rest sort of just hung around there. They're sort of just static from election time. And if you want to know when the election was, it's that white kind of little white pillar that you can see right in the middle there. That's election day. And then there was another poll that came out on Monday. And that basically said that nothing really has changed. It's all 1% changes. I think the top party actually made the most increase, but it's still within the margin of error. And so I guess the question, Simon, is that National have done a lot of what you might say controversial. There has been some tough love, and like boot camps and sanctions, and some of the policies that they've introduced, and yet their polling is pretty well holding. So I mean, they've got to be feeling pretty good about that polling, wouldn't they?
Actually, probably not, actually. I think a new government would hope and expect their numbers to go up. So I've said before, it actually was a relatively disappointing result for National at the election. Not the fact that they've been able to actually create a coalition government, but to be under 40% isn't that endearing. and the fact that National still can't crack 40%, even in 100 days or a year in now. A year in. Apologies.
Yeah.
A year in is going to be worrying them. And look, there's probably at least three really quick factors. One is, again, the media constantly attacking them. They can't do anything right, according to TV1 or TV3 or RNZ. Secondly, Luxon doesn't have the charisma, that it's not endearing to people in the way that, whether you liked her or not, Jacinda Ardern had or Key. And the third element is, I think at the end of the day, no matter what they've changed, New Zealanders are still finding it hard. If you're paying off your mortgage or going to the supermarket, it's tough and it's expensive, and people naturally blame the government regardless of who's in. So I think those factors are all playing.
Okay, I was actually just interested to check. So I was just looking at National there. You can see they, just after the election, sort of the beginning of the year, they did sort of hit the 40 mark, but that's the closest they've got, and they're certainly not there. But I still think, this was supposed to be the three-headed monster with Winston Peters and David Seymour and Christopher Luxon working together, and everybody predicted it would have imploded within 6 months. In some ways, it's actually done pretty well, considering you've got pretty three headstrong leaders there.
I'd say there's at least two factors. One is actually that the three leaders are all playing quite nicely. I mean, David and Winston will have a little bit of a go at each other. Luxon, to his credit, is not trying to be the all-dominant Prime Minister. In other words, he's giving them a little bit of room to move. If it was three strong egos, we'd have a real mess. But the second point is power is a funny thing, and once you've got it, unity becomes really important. Or put another way, these three leaders and their respective parties know that if they end up squabbling in public and making an absolute mess of things because of that squabbling, they'll lose. So they're going to hold it together, at least in public, but I better be clear, in private, it still seems to be working quite well at this stage. It's early days, Bob.
Yeah, well, let's see how popular Christopher Luxon is. Just before I do, just a reminder of our poll. I'm seeing some lots of responses coming in now as people check in. The poll is, should we change the name of the country to Aotearoa New Zealand? Aotearoa on its own is another option, but I think the most dominant call is for it to be Aotearoa New Zealand, although don't tell the media that. They sort of make up their own rules. Let's have a look at Luxon and how popular, or whether he's in touch. They asked this question about whether Christopher Luxon is in touch or out of touch with voters, and your mates at One News did a little bit of coverage of this.
Absolutely in touch. He's a fantastic leader and he's doing great things for this country.
Oh, hang on, we'll start from the start.
If you're a new Prime Minister and your honeymoon lasts 1 second, then I kind of think he hasn't been given a fair go.
As I said, I've come to Parliament as a successful former business person. I think that's good that you can have people from all walks of life across New Zealand actually coming to this place and being able to make a contribution.
Well, I mean, ultimately, Christopher Luxon himself has said that he doesn't care what New Zealanders think about the actions that his government are taking.
Labor today, absolutely brutal.
Time and again he said, I'm entitled. In fact, he said he's entitled to his entitlement. What does that say?
Well, you can't go around and say I'm wealthy and I'm sorted and think that's a great thing.
He's one of those people that when, at primary school, when I grow up, I want to be Prime Minister, and that's kind of the depth of the man that he is.
National backing their leader.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has their own background and he's doing a good job.
Absolutely in touch. He's a fantastic leader and he's doing great things for this country.
Okay, so obviously Labor doesn't think he's a good leader, and National think he's doing a great job, but that out of touch, Luxon's not going to be happy with that, is he?
No's the short answer, but partly he's actually just a man who wants to get things done. So if you wanted to take a charitable line on his comments of "I don't care," I think in some ways he doesn't care. He's there. He's got a job to do. He'll often talk about a turnaround, as he's done with businesses. So he's just got to get on with the job. But without sounding like a former politician, Bob, and hedging my bets, everything that everyone said in that little clip you shared is quite true. So Winston's right. He barely got his feet under the desk, and mainstream media were on the attack. National MPs are right to point out that actually he's hardworking. He's got a plan that he wants to focus on. But to be fair, Labor's also right insofar as he's made a number of missteps. So the way he has talked about different things, even selling houses at the moment, again, nothing wrong with any of this. Taking the entitlement for an apartment when there was also Premier House, all of these things, they sort of just sit in the background of voters. And I think it has isolated him, unfortunately, from many people. And I think the numbers are right. Anecdotally, as I go around the country, people have not warmed to him in the same way that they did to Jacinda early days, or John Key, or God, even I mention your good friend Bob, Helen Clark.
He says, Luxon says, look, whether we go up or down in the polls, as you know, I have the same position, which is I just don't care, which we saw in that little vox pop from the Labour MP who was most upset that he doesn't care, thinking that he doesn't care for any New Zealander at all. I mean, he would care, because I get the impression that actually Luxon likes that popularity because he spends so much time on social media harnessing that energy, and it tends to be focused not on the policies, it's focused on him. He's trying to build an image, isn't he? So this poll result would hurt a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, most politicians are A-type personalities, massive egos, and want to be told that they're amazing. And he will be no different. And yes, I think you've nailed it. If you look at the social media, it's very much trying to endear himself. I suppose the irony is that the more he's tried that, the actual more of a disconnect, because, you know, to quote Eminem, you know, will the real Chris Luxon stand up? And I think people just don't quite know. They just don't quite know. And I have to say, talking about I don't care, that's a flippant line, but actually he will care, and it comes across unfortunately as arrogance. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, we are a democracy, and you should care what people think. So I think it was a flippant comment, but you can see already how it's going to be blowing back in the same way, Bob, as we talked a few weeks ago when he said, I don't care about the frickin' targets. These are injudicious comments because the opposition now will just use them over and over again. Yeah.
We're not allowed to say that word in our household, are you? Just out of interest.
Well, frickin'.
You said it again. I mean, one of the interesting
I swear all the time. Get my wife on. She'll tell you I swear all the time. It's one of my terrible vices.
Only when you watch One News. That's the only time for me. One of the things was I mean the whole house business and the fact that he's done well in business. To me, that's a green-eyed monster. It seems like if you want to be Prime Minister of New Zealand, you basically have to live in a rental. It almost seems like you can't have done well at business. Has that always been the case, that we've had that kind of attitude? I mean, he's obviously done well at business, and so had John Key, and yet really we're voting them not for, I guess, the amount of money in their bank account. It's whether they've had the right attitude to get New Zealand going.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's stupid how much focus is put on the wealth that he's created. I mean, good on him. You know, put really simply, I'd much prefer to have someone who knows about running the economy, or at least a business running the show. So it's the funny thing about the New Zealand psychology. You think we would go, hey, it's fantastic. Here's a man who's been successful. Instead, we're not. And I think that's part of our tall poppy syndrome. You know, Jack's as good as his master. But I think, unfortunately for Chris, he's done missteps almost from day one, which just has isolated him from some of the things he said and how he said them in a way that someone like Key, who's wealthier, and to be fair, there are MPs, actually some former MPs now, who are much wealthier than he is, but haven't made a big deal of it. And so it's just possibly the way it's been handled, but also it was also the attack line. That's what media decided they were going to go after. And he's never sort of recovered from it.
Yeah, well, I mean, if Jacinda's earning $200,000 for a speaking gig, then she only needs to speak 5 times and she can buy a house in Auckland with cash. So, I haven't heard too much going on about that. Look, somebody sent this through at the exact point that you said it. So well done to Sana, who says, tall poppy syndrome, Kiwis are great at carrying it. Just quite a few comments come through. Rob says, no name change. Kevin says, stick with New Zealand. Rosie says, leave it as New Zealand. Why fix something that isn't broken? # New Zealand. Philippa says, definitely no. Gardner Gone Wild says, yeah, made it to the live a little late though. Welcome, Gardner. It's a no from me for changing. Damien says, no, thank you. Don't need a Frenchman naming our country. Well, it's the Dutch that originally named our country. Who's the Frenchman naming our country? Anyway, Kirstine says, is there a third option? East Australia Isles. That's the type of thing Sue Reed on my board would say, because she's from Tasmania. Absolutely not, says Lynn. Oh, there we are. Sue's here. Sue says New Zealand will be fine. Well done, Sue. You're a true Kiwi. Justine says, I like Aotearoa New Zealand, but not Aotearoa by itself. It's racist. Raywin says New Zealand only. Mayreed says, is that how you say it? Mayreed? I hope I said that right. New Zealand. Trevino says New Zealand. Scott says if it wasn't for the cost, I wouldn't mind. Nancy Margaret says leave it as New Zealand. Charmaine wants to talk about Luxon and says he doesn't care about unborn babies being killed. He needs to revisit the abortion law. New Zealanders should have a say in a referendum. Veritas says, is he out of touch? I really can't judge, but I prefer him to the Jacinda or the guy who doesn't know what a woman is. So there's a number of ones. Okay, our poll question is simply, should we change the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa New Zealand or even Aotearoa? We'll go with Aotearoa New Zealand because we have some polling to show you on that. All right, we've talked about the leader of the National Party. Let's talk about the leader of the Labour Party. And there was some polling on whether they didn't ask whether people trust him or whether they relate to him. No, they said, should he remain as the leader? And, well, a majority said he should. I suspect that most National Act and New Zealand First voters said he should remain because while he does, Labour will remain in opposition. I mean, you could argue that was their approach. Anyway, just a quick clip of what Parliament said about this.
Prime Minister, he was synonymous with sausage rolls, but the public couldn't stomach another term of Labour, slumping to defeat.
1 year on, do you think you have the public's support to remain as Leader of the Opposition?
Yes, I do. And I certainly have the support of my team. Our goal over the next 2 years is to rebuild our support.
And they sure have a lot of rebuilding to do.
Did you lose any sleep last night over your fall in the preferred Prime Minister stakes?
No, I didn't. I mean, look, all politicians love to be popular.
A tough ask, he says, in opposition.
The nature of the job is you tend to be more critical and more negative.
Our poll shows many New Zealanders back him to stay, though some think his days are numbered.
I think he's doing a fantastic job as opposition leader.
How so?
Well, every time he opens his mouth, down they go in the polls.
If anyone thinks that another new tax is going to get you back into government, then you should be on a TUI billboard.
But a former colleague says it's a very strong poll for Chris Hipkins.
Given that he's within 12 months of being defeated at the polls and quite heavily defeated at the polls.
To turn things around, she says he needs to spend more time in our biggest city and up his social media game.
Chris Hipkins needs to be known on social media as more than the sausage roll guy. And he is more than the sausage roll guy.
His caucus insist they've got his back.
And I back him 100%.
I think he's doing a great job.
Men can do a perfectly good job in politics and should be encouraged.
One MP tipped as a possible future Labour leader, Kieran McAnulty.
Chris Hipkins, should he remain on as Labour leader?
Yes.
What about you? Do you have any ambitions to be Labour leader?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Even if he was offered it?
No.
Is he sure?
Yeah.
Adamant he'll never be Labour's leader, nor a famous orator on that effort.
He's got to be a cowcocky, surely. Off the farm. No. Yep. No. I like the simplicity.
Kieran plays a multitude of roles. There's the very talky, lippy Kieran McAnulty. Then there's the really short staccato. He's almost playing a theatre. I would suggest to viewers, keep an eye on him. He wants the leadership, be under no doubt. Michael Wood, who's a former minister and now with the Etu Union because he lost his seat. He's also eyeing up a return to Parliament. So personally, I think Hipkins' days are numbered. He's just, the poll basically reflects that there isn't an heir presumptive just yet. And let's be clear, Hipkins, and this is not personal, he's just not got the same energy since the loss. He's not, as Moroney put, he's not on social media much. He's not travelling that often. There are very few press releases. I think he's run out of energy. But Bob, there's no one to replace him. Is the short answer.
Well, that was the point I was just going to make, is that is the problem that when people think of, okay, who's the natural next leader? I mean, when you look at National, there's a number of, in that, top 5 that could easily step in if Luxon was to suddenly disappear. Whereas for Labour, I'm not quite sure who would step into that role. So, and I was thinking, just as we were playing that clip, I was remember when Bill English, lost badly in the 2002 election. He stayed in the party, but he no longer remained the leader. But then obviously he did come back and became Prime Minister after John Key. Is that what Hipkins needs to do? He really just needs to go back onto the benches and build his way back up again, because all we relate to is thinking of him being the loser on election night a year ago, and maybe people can't get past that perception.
I think it's different horses for different courses, to be honest. I think the further corollary, or example, corollary for thinking Australia.
That's a big word. I don't even know what it means.
No, there's the word for the day. It's sort of the opposite view. The opposite view is John Howard, who has been one of the most successful Australian MPs and prime ministers. But he had multiple attempts and failed, but just kept going. So,
and there's Donald Trump as well.
Yeah, had to bring Trump in. Yeah, well, there's Trump. I mean, even Helen Clark. There's been a number of them that they've worked their way up and maintained. So, no, I mean, it worked for Bill English. But I don't get the feeling that Hipkins wants to be around that long. Don't forget, Bill was in politics for almost 30 years. It was a long time. Yeah.
Well, that's right. He got thrashed, so to speak, 2002. He won the election against Jacinda in 2017. So that's a 15-year, 2017, yeah. So it's 15 years between drinks. So that's a while to lose that image of having been defeated in an election. I just think that people sort of see Chris Hipkins as he lost the election. It's time for some new blood. But anyway, I'm just a rookie when it comes to these politics. Right. Let's just quickly check the poll question, and that is, should we change the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa? In fact, somebody just clarified what the French bit was about. Damien says the name Aotearoa came from a travelling Frenchman mid-1800s, not from mythology. I don't know if that's true. Anyway, you know, Simon? You look blank.
I don't. I mean, there's been multiple names, like Neoterani is another name. So different iwi use different terms. So long and short, the one thing we can say is that Māori have not had a single name for the country. Different iwi have different names, just as Matariki is celebrated in different names at different times by different iwi. So you can at least say that.
Okay, and Sue just says, absolutely, Kieran wants that leadership role. Now, Sue's actually in the Wairarapa seat, but Kieran can't even win his electoral seat here in Wairarapa. And she thinks Willow Jean Prime might be the one to watch. Do you think Willow Jean Prime's the one to watch?
I don't think so. It's no disrespect to her. She's actually quite smart, but she hasn't really brought that charisma to the fore. Now, but one of the funny things is, Bob, that once someone is in leadership, often then they can shine. In other words, you don't have to be all ready and then step into it. But you know, I'm still putting your MP up there as a potential replacement, dear old Arena Williams.
Arena Williams, okay. I'll have to show you that clip one day, that brilliant clip from the last election where she said that, yes, women could have a penis. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. And
you're worried about me using the word frickin'.
Well, penis is a biological term, even though it sounds naughty. Anyway, let's have a look at the Research New Zealand poll. A lot of people have given their opinion, and I think these results are quite interesting. So they asked about, up the top there, should te reo Māori be a compulsory subject? It's hovered around about the 1 in 3. So the darker it gets, the more recent. So the darkest is 2024. Becoming a republic, we'll come back to that shortly, Simon, because I know, you've got very strong feelings on that. I won't tell the audience which way or not. Changing the national flag, I just think we've had that debate. We had the referendum. That is over. I don't know why we're even asking that. But look at this. Change New Zealand's name. It's very low. Now, let me just show you the breakdown. And basically, to change it to Aotearoa New Zealand, just 1 in 5. Now, remember, the whole mainstream media are in that 19%. Okay, so 19%, and then not change the name is 66%. 2 in 3 of us don't want to change the name. Changing it to just Aotearoa, which the media also use a lot, is 8%. I was actually stunned by that, and I actually think New Zealand is way more conservative than you and I have given them credit for.
You and I look like liberals.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me in that, excuse me, it doesn't surprise me in that I think actually a lot of people are getting frustrated, and we touched on it at the start, when media or government officials or whoever are thrusting this at us and saying you must accept it. I think it just builds resentment, even for people who might be open to a change. They just get resented about being told what to think. But I also think, Bob, it reflects a wider frustration in New Zealand about the growing divides we have and those unfortunate tensions that are continuing to develop between Māori and Pākehā. I think it's reflecting into this poll too.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the trend there, I mean, it dropped in 2022 to 59%, 64 down to 59, then back up to 66. So actually keeping the name of New Zealand has actually grown. I mean, sure, we're within the margin of error, 2 to 3%, 4% maybe, but that's very low for Aotearoa New Zealand being at 19%. Let's combine Aotearoa New Zealand and Aotearoa. That's what, 27%? Actually, that's being pretty consistent. So even there, that is still less than 1 in 3 wanting to change the name, and yet it really is being rammed down. So that is quite conservative. But even these stats around becoming a republic and te reo Māori being compulsory, once again, this polling seems to go completely against the media narrative, but I'm probably not surprised at that, but I am a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I'm not surprised that the media's take on things, and you write quite frequently in your Substacks, your McBlog Substack, that the media are trying to preach into the people. And they're not aligned actually with the majority of views. And the more they keep thrusting, pushing, foisting this stuff onto people, I think more and more frustrations build. If they were a little bit more empathetic, we might actually see a greater uptake of, say, te reo Māori. I mean, I learned it myself at university. It's a perfectly good language. It's one of our 3 official languages. That doesn't mean we make it compulsory, but they're actually doing a disservice, that's media, I'm saying, by trying to foist this on to us. And as for the Republic, well, all I'll say is, God save the King.
Well, we'll come back to that in just a minute, actually. I mean, my argument has always been that if you want to win a debate, take the people with you. And that was one of the bugbears I had about the anti-smacking law. I said, if the anti-smacking law was so great, why couldn't they bring more than 13%, according to the referendum, along with them? Why, they needed to persuade the people that we needed this law, but it was just literally smack down, pardon the pun, on people. All right, let's keep moving along and let's check in on a couple of MPs. Firstly, Darlene Tāna. Is she going to be chucked out of the Green Party tonight, and are we going to have a new MP in Parliament tomorrow morning?
Hard to say. So for viewers to understand, the Green Party's holding, I suspect by Zoom, I don't know, but they're holding a party meeting tonight to decide her fate, which means you can predict they will vote to kick her out and invoke the Waka jumping law, even though they've very strongly campaigned against it. But you can hear my slight hesitation is because I understand Darlene Tāna's appealing to the Court of Appeal around some aspect of the law. So that might delay things. But personally, I think her time is coming to an end. But it's just going to be delayed a bit further. And ultimately, Bob, I mean, you think about the number of these political playbacks where we've talked about Darlene Tāna and the Greens. This is really costing them as a party. This is a mess which they've been unable to sort out quickly.
Yeah, although I was interested to just check that their polling, so that's the light green, third one down. It's despite all this chaos, they have literally, what's this one? They actually went up 1% in the last One News poll, and yet maybe it's because we haven't seen them, because they literally have gone to ground. I mean, I haven't seen Chloe Schwarbrick on TV. I think I saw her once last week, and normally the media are running to her for comment. They're almost giving her space because of this mud that's been thrown around because of this issue. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. And like you say, the Greens are going to have to swallow a big dead rat to use a law that they fought against. What's the saying? I have some principles, and if we don't like them, I have some other principles. Isn't that the law?
I have others, yes, Groucho Marx.
Now, speaking of other MPs, and they just happen to be Green MPs, Golriz. Is Golriz appealing, and I mean court-wise? She pleaded guilty to the shoplifting charges, and of course we remember she turned up to the Posey Parker rally ready to fight Nazis or TERFs, and she's ready for from the river to the sea. But anyway, she is appealing, and I don't mean in the we like her category. So what does this mean? I mean, why is she doing it when quite clearly she's been found guilty, and it's not just once, it was a number of times?
So she's hoping for a much lighter sentence. So she's not going to, or she's not appealing her court decision because she changed her plea or now views herself as not guilty. What she wants is a severely reduced or even a commuted sentence, because practically speaking, what's happened for her so far means, as far as I understand it, Bob, she would not be able to practice law again because she no longer is a good character. She has a conviction. It may also even have an impact on her ability to travel to the likes of even Australia or America. They've got pretty strong views on convicted criminals. So
yes, every time I sweat going into Australia, they say, have you got a criminal conviction? And I have to, I ask my kids, have I got a criminal conviction? I mean, yeah. So she won't be able to go there or into the States possibly.
Yeah, so those will be the motivations, I'm guessing, or speculating that, and that's quite reasonable. I mean, I'm not trying to take a judgment on her per se, but it's not an unreasonable thing for someone to try and do. I mean, you and I, for theory's sake, would probably pitch to do that, although it does sort of show a lack of contrition on her part, perhaps even an entitlement. I mean, at the end of the day, this was someone in a very privileged position repeatedly stealing tens of thousands of dollars of goods. And, that's had a material, literal and figurative impact on those businesses.
Yep. Okay, let's continue. And this will trigger a few people. Jacinda Ardern was made officially a dame. I thought this was interesting of the New Zealand Herald to put up this image, really humbled. Prince William makes Republican Jacinda Ardern a dame, and then they said, spread a little kindness. Prince William makes Republican Jacinda Ardern a dame. You're a Republican, aren't you, Simon?
Yeah, that's right. Duck off with his head. No, staunch constitutional monarchist.
Why is it that people who are Republicans accept awards from institutions that they're trying to get rid of? I haven't quite figured that out. I mean, I haven't got a problem with them campaigning to be a republic, but I mean, that's a little bit like me receiving an award from the cannabis industry for my contribution to the industry. It's not going to happen. Look,
it's a clear hypocrisy, but Republicans love the monarchy. They're almost obsessed with it. And strong Republicans will take all the baubles and the titles and the honors. They want to be photographed with the royal family. They know that they're the biggest celebrities in the world, so they just love it. To be fair, looking back to someone like Helen Clark, she actually was much more robust into this space. But John Key was a Republican. It's sort of a very soft monarchist. But again, he, like Jacinda, more than happy to be associated because they know it's good for them. And look, Jacinda knows darn well that with the Dame in front of her name, that's prefix, that's going to enable her to earn even more money. But what made me sick, Bob, almost literally, was the whole "a little kindness." When you think of the damage that woman has done to New Zealand, be it economy-wise, socially, everything through the COVID period, right through to now, all the pain we're feeling in the economy is due to her and her government. So to be lectured on kindness, including from someone who basically doesn't live here anymore, that's one of the other ironies. She's ruined the country and then fled.
Okay, my comments machine is just about smoking with all the comments coming through. Just to really wind you up, today Labour leader Chris Hipkins lamented the absence of Dame Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand's public life and wants the government to give her a role promoting the country's cause. And he's one of her closest friends in politics. He says, quote, "The frustration I have is that I think there's a very small, very vocal, very angry minority of people who made Jacinda's participation in New Zealand's public dialogue at the moment very difficult. I don't think that's reflective of the views of the vast majority of New Zealanders." Once again, I think Chris Hipkins might not be reading the room.
No, he's completely out of touch. Unfortunately, despite her best intentions, and if you and I were sitting down having a chat with her now, she'd be perfectly pleasant. I've always got on well with her personally. But politically, what she's done to this country, we're more divided, we're economically stuffed, we isolated she did, and scapegoated tens of thousands of New Zealanders, all in the name of kindness. She's unfortunately the opposite of the things she says. So no, there should be no public role for her. The government should not indulge her in any way. She's very free, like any citizen, to opine if she so chooses. But just like she chose herself to leave politics, no one forced her out. She chose to leave. She's also chosen to leave New Zealand, by and large, and take up these roles overseas. Again, she's very welcome to do it. But it's just Chris Hipkins attempting and failing to try and tap into an enthusiasm, supposedly today, that this damehood was granted.
I think, just thinking from a natural perspective, if I was a prime minister or a leader and I retired, stepped down at a point where things were still good and I was popular and liked, I think I'd feel like I had a bit of a endorsement to be able to go around and tell people how to do it, or how to be a leader. But the thing that I can't quite get my head around is that, I always say her political star was the fastest one I have ever seen in politics, from the high of 2020 to the low of the next election. And she got out a year earlier because she was smart enough to see the writing on the wall. And so, in effect, she was voted out. She saw the writing on that wall, very unpopular. The polling showed that. And yet here she is going around telling people how to do politics and how to be a leader. I just find that a little bit tone deaf because of what happened at the end of her political life. It's a bit like, who was that cyclist that took drugs to win the French cycling races?
Lance Armstrong.
It's a bit like him going around preaching about being drug free. It just doesn't quite sit right. Can politicians go around when they have been destroyed in an election? If Scott Morrison turned up, who was destroyed at the last Australian election, and started preaching to us about how great a leader he was and why we should all follow his example, I don't think anybody would turn up, would they?
No, they wouldn't. And look, to be fair, I don't think Jacinda herself's going out there and saying those things, but in the international space, so not domestic, international space, they're playing very much into the whole, intersectionality or DEI or identity politics, whatever you want to call it. That's what they tapped Jacinda for, not what she did. Okay, so at the end of the day, international groups love the fact that she was a young woman. She had a beautiful young daughter while in Parliament, and she spoke about kindness, and she was just lovely. Yeah. That's what they tap her for. They don't look, as I keep saying, that she's destroyed this country on so many levels. And I am not exaggerating, by the way, when I say that our country is not quite irrevocably, but very damaged because of those 6 years under her government.
And you actually sat in Parliament at the time that abortion law was going through, and she was preaching kindness and locking us down for the vulnerable people, which we were happy to do at the time because we didn't know enough about COVID. And here she was ramming through this abortion law. I mean, it must have been galling to sit in the Parliament listening to all that, wasn't it?
Well, it was. It doesn't matter if it's abortion or, the best I could during the COVID years, trying to fight back on a number of things they were doing, all masked by these words. But this is the perversion we see in language now. What I mean by that is the twisting or the turning of it. Kindness now is, terminating the unborn. Compassion is terminating the ill, the disabled, and the elderly. This is what we see with our language. Tolerance only goes for the people who are to be tolerated. Anyone who's got a different view, such as a conservative, is to be tolerated by being tossed out. So this is what I mean by that perversion, that twisting of language. And no kindness from Jinda Ard to the unborn.
No. Okay, look, we're just about out of time. Let's quickly do a check on our Substacks because you and I are both prolific writers on Substack.
That guy's amazing.
It's a bit of a competition between me and Simon as to who's got the most Substacks. The problem is that Simon, just for the viewers, Simon has 5 times more readership than I do. So I have to put out 5 Substacks to equal his 1. Well, anyway, that's what I tell Simon. Anyway, Simon, what have you been writing about? Which one is it?
Oh, this was just very quickly, and encourage people to jump onto Substack and read it. It's just the inconsistencies. At one moment, the media, for example, are reporting what's happening, and at the other moment, they're actually promoting what's happening. In fact, you're about to see it again with the new hikoi that's being developed up north. The media are not just reporting it, but actually advertising it. So, so that's a couple of examples across a couple of topics in that Substack.
And we know where that is heading. I mean, we talked about this last week about what happens when the media starts campaigning and promoting like they did the Otago Daily Times with the Dunedin Hospital. Sure, it's an important cause and you can understand why they may support it. But because they have campaigned for it, advertised it, made it front page, can they fairly report it any longer? I mean, can the media fairly report the hikoi when they're effectively promoting it and advertising it? My gut reaction is they've taken sides on this debate before it's even begun. Yeah, and those are actually some of the very examples in that Substack, and just saying, well, which one is it? And the other thing I quickly point out is it's a silly story almost, Bob. It's about dress standards in Christchurch bars and people complaining that these private bars and nightclubs have dress standards. And I point out I don't particularly care as such, but here they are saying that private businesses can't make their rules. And yet these same people a couple of years ago were celebrating businesses setting rules about masks and distances and who could come in and who can't. So I'm just saying, well, which one is it? Which one is it? Let's be consistent, eh? Okay. Now, just in terms of what I published, I just did highlight a study that the media have ignored, interestingly enough, and I know why. It was a study done by academics from Victoria University and Otago University. And as you know, Simon, I have a lot of time for Victoria University academics when they're not talking about pedophilia and trying to normalise it. But they did a study where they interviewed people or did a survey on attitudes to the media. And what they did was they basically were confirming the lack of trust. But what they found in this survey was that not only do we not trust the media, we're actually avoiding it. In other words, we say that we deliberately don't watch certain programs or certain reporters because we just don't want to. And so we've got one of the highest rates in the world. But then when they looked at people who basically have turned off the news media and don't watch it at all, once again, the average rate across the 47 countries that Reuters surveyed was about 3% of people turn off the TV or, don't watch the news media at all. We were at 13%. So we have got the highest rate of distrust in the media and also turning off the news media. And I just make the comment, look, when you go to the doctor and you get some bad news that, maybe you might be getting pre-diabetic or there's some condition that you have and you need to take some action, generally you get out of that office and you immediately go and make some changes. The media just doesn't want to seem to take any critique. And it seems like, as I put there, the news media is so desperate to push an agenda that they're willing to go down in a screaming heap of fire while pushing that agenda, and it amazes me.
Oh, it does. I mean, I can't really add much to what you've said and written.
No.
I thought it was a great Substack. My problem, Bob, is that just as I'm finishing reading one of yours, another comes in. I barely get any work done.
Well, I did put out one just a couple of hours ago, and it was because I sat all yesterday watching the coverage of Trump dancing at a rally, and it made him look kind of silly. He was dancing at this rally, but then when you actually went and looked at the reason, it was because while he was speaking at a rally, 2 people actually had medical events, and so he literally got the people to stop the town hall rally and made sure that these people were tended to. The lack of information and the nuance not being given to us by the media and New Zealand media, the whole New Zealand media were singing off the same song sheet, and I thought it was just disgraceful. Anyway, whew,
well, I'm
right.
pleased. Can I just say, I'm pleased you wrote it, because I wasn't following it at length, but could have been a bit distracted. But when I'd seen the headlines, I thought, well, that is a bit odd that he chose to dance for 39 minutes. And the way that the media was reporting it was that he'd basically gone a bit doolally. Whereas what you've said and written actually provided a lot more context to go, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Actually, it's almost a charitable thing to do.
Yeah, of course. And I actually used the example of, I remember one time in church when a person collapsed and we needed to give them medical attention. And this was very old school when I was about a teenager. And the minister just carried on preaching the sermon. It was kind of like, don't interrupt my sermon. And I always thought to myself, I never want to be in a church that takes that kind of reaction. I think we should stop as a church and tend to the need of the person rather than making the sermon the priority. And this, to me, was what Trump did. He actually showed some concern and care for the people that had the medical event. It happened twice, and he was praising the first responders, and he lightened up. Hey, there was a whole lot of joy in that meeting, and I thought joy in a meeting was supposed to be the positive thing. How did we get into American politics?
Just like.
Anyway, we will be back Monday night for Straight Talk. We're out of time now. We're out of time, and I don't have time to read all these comments. You'll just have to go to our Facebook page and YouTube to read some of them. Some of them are quite funny. But we will be back Monday night for Straight Talk. And then Tuesday, Simon and I are actually in Sydney at an ARC conference. That's your first one, isn't it, Simon?
It is, yeah. And for those who don't know, it's ARC is an acronym for the Alliance for Responsible Citizens. So the likes of John Anderson, former Deputy PM, I did a Family Matters with him a few weeks ago. Jordan Peterson will be a name people know. Niall Ferguson, John Howard's there. Tony Abbott, Scott Morrison's even going to be there, Bob. So
here we are. I'll say hello.
A whole pile of people. Yeah, it'll be great.
Okay, well, we'll go pack our bags, and I'm actually in Brisbane this weekend speaking at a church and Adelaide, speaking at a church and state conference. So we're really indoctrinating the Aussies, so that's great, Simon. We'll keep doing that. Our board members will be pleased. Anyway, we are out of time. Thank you for watching. This is Political Playback, and we will be back same time next Thursday at 5 o'clock. Until then, you have a great night. Good night, Simon.